Let's get straight into it. Mission Impossible franchise mini review and ranking. I'll put the timestamp at the bottom for the actual ranking. I'll do that at the end of the video. We're going to go through each movie one by one and give it a mini review and then do the ranking at the end. I will say as well, there will be spoilers for every single one of the Mission Impossible movies. So if you don't want any of them spoiled, don't watch this video. Or go and watch all the movies and then come back and watch this video. Mission Impossible 1, 1996, directed by Brian De Palma. We just finished the franchise rewatch, and the things that stuck out to me on this one were, first of all, smoking on planes, the old school floppy disk drive tech, that kind of took me back. There's not much about the movie that dates it, but those two things definitely do. I remember when people used to smoke on planes. I was a kid, but still, it was gross. I love how it's very much a Brian De Palma movie. Like with, you know, the Dutch angles and the kind of the Rashomon style editing and showing you the same event from different perspectives and showing you inside the characters' heads and how they imagine the different ways that that scenes played out. If you think about it too much, it does rely heavily on circumstance and on coincidence for A to get to B and for X to become Z. And for some reason I'd skipped out Y there. Bible thing with the Job 3:14 and the random message forums, that's a big stretch. That being said, this movie is iconic. The heist where he steals the knock list, that is iconic, I think, in cinema history. The helicopter chase into the channel, the chopper in the channel tunnel, that's iconic as well. I remember thinking at the time when I saw that, I think, so when did this come out? 96. I would have been maybe 13 probably, depending on the month. Like, I remember watching that and being amazed by that stunt. Looking at it now, it is very obviously CG, but it's not terrible. Like, I've seen movies released in the past few years with worse CGI than what was in the first Mission movie. I love that Mission 1 is under 2 hours. My only issue with the kind of more recent ones is that they're a wee bit too long. 20 minutes or so cut from them wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. The arrangement of the tune from the U2 guys is also very cool. I actually remember, I'm almost positive they released that as a single, like as a CD single in the UK, and I think it charted quite well. I remember buying that CD. 7 out of 10 for Mission Impossible 1. And that leads us on to Mission Impossible 2 from the year 2000. I like how at the start of this movie, they reverse what they do at the start of the first movie. You've got the bad guy wearing a Tom mask instead of Tom wearing the bad guy mask. So I think that was like a deliberate little twist on its head, or, face turn, if you will. I mean, the rock climbing scene, that's iconic, as is the Ben Stiller comedy skit from the MTV Movie Awards.
I think if you're going to be a really good stunt double, you have to really become one with the actor. You have to walk like the actor, talk like the actor, legally change your name to sound like the actors.
Hans Zimmer, I think, does a great job on the score as well. The Limp Bizkit theme tune is almost as iconic and memorable as the movie itself. Yeah, I think this movie, and especially that opening, is just the epitome of 90s action movies. The relationship between Tandy Newton's character and Tom Cruise's character, kind of out of sight vibes, I think, is what they were maybe going for, but their chemistry felt a little bit forced. It didn't feel as natural as, for example, George Clooney and J-Lo in Out of Sight. Like, if you listen back to Hans Zimmer's score for Mission Impossible 2, there are certain cues where you do get, you do get Gladiator vibes and you do get Dark Knight vibes. So that's always interesting to see the progression over decades of film music and of a specific composer's work. The overly dramatic slow-mo is overly dramatic, borderline cheesy at times, but, it's a John Woo movie, so that's what you should expect. The tone feels a little bit off for Mission 2, I have to say, especially compared to Mission 1 and the rest of the Mission movies that come after it. There is some quality lines, though. Anthony Hopkins has got a line in it where he says,
"But to go to bed with a man at night time, she's a woman. She's got all the training she needs."
The epitome of 90s action movie misogyny. And then, of course, there's the absolute classic line that Dougray Scott says where he just yells, "I am gagging for it." Yeah, that one stays with you. The face mask CGI is impressive, but it feels like it's overused a little bit in this movie. And as much as I like Dougray Scott, a fellow Scott, he's definitely hamming it up to 11 in this movie. It's a little bit too much at times. There's the Last of the Mohicans homage halfway through the movie. And of course, it wouldn't be a John Woo movie without some slow-mo pigeons. I actually loved Mission 2 as a teenager. I think I was probably 16 or 17 when it came out. I loved the OTT action, but in hindsight, when you're doing a franchise rewatch, it becomes obvious that Mission 2 isn't the best of the franchise. There's a long stretch in the middle, even though it's only 2 hours long, that stretch kind of drags a little bit. So I'm going to give a generous 6 out of 10 for Mission Impossible 2. So that takes us to Mission Impossible 3 from 2006. 6 years later, directed by J.J. Abrams this time in his directorial debut, he made his name on TV shows such as Alias and Lost. And yeah, the opening of Mission 3 is still the best opening of the franchise. I mean, Philip Seymour Hoffman playing against type at that time, still the best villain of the franchise. That opening scene and his line delivery and the menace in his face it totally just drags you in to the drama of the movie. It doesn't open with a big action sequence. It doesn't open with, Tom Cruise hanging off of a rock or hanging off of a plane. It opens with Tom Cruise and Philip Seymour Hoffman having a conversation at gunpoint, to be fair, but it's a conversation and it is gripping and it just totally draws you in. Yeah, so the running time of Mission 3 is 2 hours and 6 minutes compared to 2 hours and 3 minutes of Mission 2, compared to 1 hour and 50 minutes of Mission 1. Mission 3 doesn't feel too long at all. I think the pacing of it is really good. And again, I think J.J. Abrams coming from the TV world where you have to hit, certain ad breaks at certain times. I think that definitely helped keep the pace of this film contained and not overly long and not feel too dragged out. From 20-minute sequence to the next 20-minute sequence, it's boom, 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 boom. Right from the start, this one feels different than Mission 2, and even Mission 1. It's more grounded, it's more gritty, it's less flashy than Mission 2. There's no gun acrobatics happening. Kerry Russell's mini bomb in her head at the start is nasty. The bridge scene, that's like the kind of the midway stunt, is brilliant. It's a tense action scene and it's kind of unique because Ethan and his team are outmatched and outguns, and you start to really feel the stakes where, they might not win this particular battle. And Anthony Hopkins is now replaced by Lawrence Fishburne, who is, the new head of the IMF, and Tandy Newton, as the female lead, has been replaced by Maggie Q for reasons. That's kind of like, for the first 4 or 5 movies, that's kind of a trait of the Mission movies. The support team aren't interchangeable. It's really only Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt and Ving Rhames' Luther who are consistent throughout the franchise. The rest of the support team, they change with every movie until you get to the latter half of the franchise. So yeah, 7 out of 10 for Mission Impossible 3. I almost went with an 8 out of 10, but when you claw back and just go with a 7 out of 10 for Mission 3, it's a great movie, and that opening scene is brilliant. Philip Seymour Hoffman, still the best bad guy of the franchise. And that takes us to the 4th movie of the franchise. I think 5 or 6 years later in 2011, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. We've dropped the numbers from the franchise and we're just going with the subheading of Ghost Protocol. This one, we have Brad Bird making his directorial debut in terms of live action. He was famous for directing animations such as The Incredibles and The Iron Giant. I think he worked on The Simpsons as well. Anyway, this was his first live action movie. There's a slightly more playful tone with Ghost Protocol. Simon Pegg's Benji has been upgraded to a proper co-star now. He is a field agent. He passed the field exam. Like the Fuse, that scene at the start is very cool to take you into the movie. And as much as I love Michael Giacchino's scores in general, I loved his score for Mission 3. I wasn't a huge fan of the score for Mission 4. The arrangement felt a little bit too playful, a little bit too animation like. It reminded me of, ironically or not surprisingly, The Incredibles in terms of the score and the playful tone of it. The fact that the gadgets break down in Ghost Protocol is a very nice touch. It gives it a different feel to the movie, and it does play into the playfulness of the tone of Mission 4. The downside to that is it makes the stakes feel less real, I suppose, for lack of a better phrase. And we couldn't talk about Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol without talking about that Burj Khalifa scene, the tallest building in the world. That scene is still one of the best scenes in the franchise, if not the best scene in terms of like the stunts. There's something about it, the fact that it's a building so you can see the ground and you know that it's a real building and you know that he's actually hanging out of that building. Now, yes, he's got safety wires that they CGI'd out and stuff like that, but it's still Tom Cruise swinging around the outside of the tallest building in the world with the ground, all the way down there. Seeing that in IMAX, I remember, I'm not afraid of heights, but I remember almost getting vertigo when there's that opening shot of the Burj Khalifa where the camera flies over and it looks down at the tower. That was, that was a memorable movie moment for sure. I also remember at the time the rumour was that Jeremy Renner was being potentially set up as a replacement for Cruise in the franchise, but obviously that didn't happen. Now, if I'm nitpicking, it's not a perfect movie. The worst thing about this movie, and it's a flaw that a lot of the Mission movies have, is the bad guy. The bad guy in Ghost Protocol is completely forgettable. I can't even remember the character's name. Pretty sure it's played by Michael Nyqvist, who was coming off of a famous turn in the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series. But yeah, he is completely forgettable. His character is completely forgettable in this movie. He wasn't a threat to Ethan physically, mentally. A very one-dimensional character. This one's 2 hours and 21 minutes, so not massively long, but I do think if they'd shaved maybe 10 or 15 minutes off the runtime, this would have been better paced. The whole scene in India where Paula Patton has to, get the thing, to do the thing, to unlock the thing, they could have maybe cut that or lost that, although, the stunt with Jeremy Renner in the magnet suit, that was pretty cool. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a filmmaker, but 10 minutes off the runtime I think would have helped this movie. And there's not enough Luther in this movie. The last scene of Ghost Protocol is one of my favourites of that movie and of the franchise. That's where you see Julia, Ethan's wife from Mission 3, and you realise that Jeremy Renner's character, Brandt, who can't let go of the guilt of, being responsible for her death. And it's revealed that she didn't die. And it's quite emotional, and it feels like a little reward for fans of the franchise, for fans of the third movie, and fans of the franchise overall. The fact that, it's a cameo. I don't think she's got any lines. It's like 2 or 3 shots that you see her in, but it does give a nice little thread connecting it to the previous movie, which is something that they do more in the future installments. 8 out of 10 for Ghost Protocol. Of the first 4 movies, it is actually my favourite. And I didn't realise this, or I didn't remember this until doing the franchise rewatch. The end of Ghost Protocol, the literal last shot, and almost like an end credits scene, even though it's just before the credits, they actually set up the bad guy organisation for Rogue Nation. They set up the Syndicate by name at the end of Ghost Protocol, which I must have just not noticed or forgot. And that takes us to Mission Impossible Rogue Nation from 2015. By this point, we're firmly just ditching the numerals from the titles. It's not Mission Impossible 5, it's just Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. Again, much like Mission Impossible 3, this one has a killer opening, but in a different way. Rather than putting the big, stunt at the middle of the movie, like they did in Ghost Protocol, with this one, they have put the big stunt front and centre right at the start of the movie. This is the one where Tom Cruise is hanging off of that big Airbus military plane as it takes off. And from the marketing and whatnot, that it actually is him. He actually is hanging on to the side of a plane as it takes off. Now again, yes, he's, wired in and he's got safety goggles on that they CGI out, but still, he's hanging on to the side of a plane, like a jet plane, as it takes off. This is mental. Is it a jet plane? I'm not sure if it's technically a jet plane. It's a really big plane that goes really high and really fast, and Tom Cruise is hanging off the edge of it. So that's quite a bold opening. Paula Patton has been replaced by Rebecca Ferguson as the female lead in this one. Her character, Ilsa Faust, I believe is the name, is quite interesting. And when you pair the interesting character with Rebecca Ferguson's natural charm and charisma and kind of like aloofness almost, it does make for quite an intriguing performance. Simon Pegg's Benji gets a lot more to do in Rogue Nation. He's almost like a co-lead, I would say, in this one. I think the filmmakers realised they not only had, a comedy actor on their hands, but they had a serious actor on their hands as well. So they're taking advantage of that. The flip side to giving Simon Pegg's Benji more to do is Jeremy Renner's Brandt has less to do in this one. The underwater scene, which is the stunt midway through the movie, that was quite tense. That's a mix of CGI and practical stuff, but I do think it just looks overly CGI, even though it is Tom Cruise and he is underwater and he is swinging around. The CGI of it, something about it just takes you out of the action just a little bit, but it's still a really tense sequence. And the fact that they have Rebecca Ferguson's Ilsa save Ethan, literally save his life, again gives her character more and makes Ethan's character literally more fallible, because he dies and gets revived. The ending for this one is great. It's not a massive shootout. It's not, there's no nuclear bombs at stake. It's just, it's a really cleverly choreographed foot chase through the streets of London that result in that, Perspex glass trap that kind of mirrors the opening scene in the record store where Ethan is trapped in the listening booth in the record store. The way they trap Solomon Lane in the Perspex booth at the end is a nice touch. Speaking of that, Sean Harris is Simon Lane. Much better bad guy than Nyquist was in the previous movie. Very menacing and gives off like a genuine threat energy, but he's underused in this movie. But that's okay, because in the next one, he's back for more. 8 out of 10 for Rogue Nation. Before I did the rewatch, in my mind, this was going to be like lower down in my ranking, but I really did enjoy it more, I think, on repeat viewing. So yeah, 8 out of 10 for Rogue Nation. That takes us to Mission Impossible Fallout, the 6th movie in the Mission Impossible franchise. This is the shortest time in between movies at this point. I believe it was only 3 years between Rogue Nation from 2015 and Fallout in 2018. This has got an interesting opening again, but for a different reason. It's not a big action sequence. It's not a tense conversation at gunpoint. It's actually a dream, or a kind of vision, or a nightmare, or all three, the wedding and the nuclear blast and whatnot. The fake Wolf Blitzer TV news report scene at the start as well was very cool, and it was felt like a subtle callback to Mission 1, the way that opened as well. Can't talk about Fallout without talking about Henry Cavill, the Cavalrine, and that mustache. He was really good in this movie, and I think it's something that the franchise needed. A little bit of fresh blood, as it were. Angela Bassett as well, Alec Baldwin, a whole bunch of new heavy hitters in this movie. Henry Cavill literally being a heavy hitter, the scene where he reloads his arms, iconic. Yeah, good cast in this one, really good cast in this one. Pace-wise, it's really good from the Halo jump near the start straight into the bathroom fight. The opening 30 minutes or so of Fallout just doesn't let up. The fact that Cavill and Tom Cruise get their ass kicked convincingly by the guy in the bathroom scene is quite refreshing and a little bit different. And also the fact that they have to be saved by Ilsa yet again gives her character not more points, but gives her character more gravitas and more importance to the movie and to the franchise. It was a great way to kind of subvert the expectations of that scene. There's a really good score to Fallout by Lorne Balfe. It's I'm not sure if he did the score for the previous movie or not, but I really liked the score for Fallout. It's got military vibes. It feels more serious. The storyline for this one as well, even though it's not a direct sequel to Rogue Nation, it kind of is a part 2 to Rogue Nation, because it's the same bad guy, but the twist to the story is that rather than trying to catch Sean Harris's Solomon Lane, which is what the 5th movie, which is what Rogue Nation was about, in this movie they have to break him out of jail in order to do the thing they have to do to save the world. It's genius storytelling. I think it worked really, really, really well. The Benji Lane mask scene was brilliant, and I do remember being completely caught off guard by that in the cinema the first time I saw it. That's a really good scene. Simon Pegg played it brilliantly, and so did Sean Harris. Sean Harris pretending to be Simon Pegg, pretending to be Solomon Lane. It's like 4 levels of Inception, and the little the little quirks and physical traits that they both have and that they both tried to mimic was really good. I don't think that scene gets enough love, but I think Sean Harris and Simon Pegg do brilliant stuff in this movie. As I've said before, weak bad guys, weak antagonists is something that plagues most of the Mission franchise, but here they double down on that. Not only do we have one good bad guy in Sean Harris, but you've got, spoilers, Henry Cavill as another good bad guy. So yeah, we go from having a forgettable bad guy in Ghost Protocol to a good but underused bad guy in Rogue Nation to 2 great bad guys in Fallout. Luther's monologue about Julia and Ethan when he's talking to Ilsa is oddly touching, and I think that was nice to give Ving Rhames and his character Luther something more to do. And then the twist with the character of Julia at the medical camp at the end was a proper gut punch and a real surprise. That worked really, really well, and it gives a kind of, not tying up loose threads, but it does give a sense of closure to that character and to the relationship between Ethan and Julia. The editing in this one is pitch perfect as well. The cross cutting at the end between the three scenes, between you've got Luther and Julia trying to dismantle the bomb. You've got Benji and Ilsa fighting Lane in the kind of in the cabin cottagey place, and at the same time you've got Henry Cavill and Tom Cruise in their helicopter chase / fight scene, and the way they cross cut between those three is, and just build the tension for the kind of the final act of the movie. It's just brilliant. It's very much action movie peak, I would say. Ilsa is trying to strangle Lane before Benji chokes to death from the noose. That's like tense stuff, and it's something that I haven't seen before in an action movie franchise, not that I can remember anyway. It just, that bit stood out to me as being, that was cool. You could argue that the helicopter bit at the cliff edge at the end is a little bit of a cliffhanger rip-off, but Cliffhanger's an awesome movie, so if you're going to borrow from an awesome movie. 9 out of 10 for Mission Impossible Fallout. And that takes us to the 7th movie of the Mission Impossible franchise, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, or as they have retconned it, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. First thing that stood out to me about this movie, Kittredge returns. That was something that was unexpected, but story-wise makes complete sense. I like how the framing and the editing of the Kittredge hunt chat in the briefing room in this one almost mirrors the way that scene in Mission 1 in the fish tank restaurant was shot. That was that felt like a nice subtle way to call back not only to those two characters' history, but literally, the scene in that movie in Mission 1. The AI storyline, while completely fantastical, is also kind of scarily relevant in today's society. ChatGPT, deepfakes, face replacements, all of that stuff. Yeah. With every day that passes, that becomes scarily more relevant. Ethan and Grace in handcuffs, their car chase was kind of reminiscent of the James Bond movie Tomorrow Never Dies with Pierce Brosnan and Michelle Yeoh on the motorbike. I think it was in Tomorrow Never Dies. That, borrows from that with the Mini and whatnot as they drive around. I loved the score on this one. I think Lorne Balfe managed to reinvent yet again that classic tune, but make it even more serious, less playful, but still quite badass. Spoilers, Ilsa's death in this one felt cheap, felt like she was fridged, as they say, to give Ethan more motivation to hate Gabriel. Pom Klementieff is very convincingly badass in this movie. I would love to see her get more mainstream roles. Gabriel has more to do in this one than he does in the next one, but we'll get to that. He's very much relegated to the sidelines in Final Reckoning, but in this one, he's not the weakest of the bad guys, but essentially his bad guy, his Gabriel, is a henchman to the entity, to, the AI bad guy, so it does feel like there's less for him to do. The train top fight at the end, again, nice callback to Mission Impossible 1, and then the very end of that, kind of reminiscent of Jurassic Park 2, of The Lost World. But if you're going to borrow from movies, that's not a bad movie to borrow from. This one did feel a little bit too long for me, and given that it was very obviously and deliberately a part 1, it just felt a little bit light. Like it left me wanting more of a conclusion, which is, maybe not a fair criticism to levy at it, because it literally is part 1. But I do wonder if the movie would have been received better if they didn't call it part 1, and if they separated the stories between Dead Reckoning and Final Reckoning a little bit more. 7 out of 10 for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. And that takes us to the 8th and final installment of the Mission Impossible franchise, Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning. I really, really enjoyed this movie. I'll put a link to my full review in the description below. What to say about Final Reckoning? The submarine sequence is brilliant. It's like a 20-minute sequence that's dialogue free, and it's yes, there is hints of the abyss, but it's hard not to love that sequence. I think seeing it in IMAX definitely increased my enjoyment of it. It's just such a tense sequence when the submarine door opens with Ethan there, and you see the other submarine chasing him, or chasing, the mains chasing the American sub. that took me by surprise. Like, I wasn't expecting to see that, and it was like, whoa, like, you know, you're seeing it in IMAX and it's just this giant submarine coming straight at the camera. That was a moment. The plane chase at the end as well, watching that in IMAX is like an onslaught to your senses in a good way, knowing that it's Ethan Hunt, that it's Tom Cruise strapped to the wings of a biplane as it's doing loop-de-loops and, you know, flips and all of this stuff. It's mental. The fact that this guy's like 62, 63 and still doing this is mental. I like the darker tone of this movie as well, the global real world stakes, and again the AI storyline only becomes even more relevant in the real world. You know, from the 2 years in 2023 when Dead Reckoning came out to 2025's Final Reckoning, AI has become even more scary. 8 out of 10 for Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Definitely one of my favourites of the franchise. So that takes us to the franchise rankings. So we're going to go from worst to best of the Mission movies. Now, let me preface this by saying I don't think there's a bad movie in the bunch. I think the Mission franchise outdoes Bond, it outdoes Bourne very, very comfortably. So don't think there's a bad movie in the franchise. That being said, worst to best. Worst of the franchise for me, Mission Impossible 2, gave that a 6 out of 10. Dead Reckoning Part 1, gave that a 7 out of 10. It just felt a little bit too long and a little bit too much like a Part 1, even though it is Part 1. Then we've got Mission Impossible 1, 7 out of 10. The movie that launched the franchise still holds up really, really well. Toyed with giving it an 8, but going with a 7 out of 10. Then we've got Rogue Nation, which I gave an 8 out of 10. Mission Impossible 3 also gets an 8 out of 10. Ghost Protocol, 8 out of 10. Final Reckoning, 8 out of 10. But my favourite of the bunch is Fallout. It's the most out-and-out action movie of the franchise, I think. And having both Henry Cavill and Sean Harris as two good bad guys just tips this movie above the rest. 9 out of 10 for Mission Impossible Fallout. So that's my Mission Impossible franchise ranking. Let me know your ranking in the comments below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Have I got it totally wrong in your eyes? Does anyone think that Mission Impossible 2 isn't the worst of the franchise? And as I said, I love me some John Woo, but Mission 2, worst of the franchise. Let me know in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next video.